I think we're ready to begin the webinar. I'd like to welcome families and parents to UC San Diego's Health, Safety, and Culture Abroad webinar for parents and families of students studying abroad this coming year. I am Kelly O'Sullivan Summer. I'm the Director of Study Abroad here at UC San Diego, and I've got my co-panelists with me. They'll introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jim Galvin. I'm Director of Global Seminars and Opportunities Abroad.
And I'm Kim Burton, Director of the Education Abroad program here at UCSD.
I'd like to congratulate all of you. Your students are about to embark on an amazing journey, and we have very much enjoyed working with them through our office. I'd like to cover the topics that we will be covering today so that you know what to get out of this webinar. We want to share with you how you can best work together with the Study Abroad office. And then we'll be talking about general safety for your students while abroad, personal safety for your students, tips for reducing risk, health and well-being for your students while abroad, and then a little bit about culture shock and what your students can expect when they're abroad. Things we won't be covering today, but that you will be able to get information on in other places and at other times, are country-specific information for your students. We will not be going into detailed information about your students' individual programs. We simply don't have the time or ability to answer those questions in this webinar today. And this will not be information for students. They will receive different or separate information about this, and they'll have several orientations about all of this information that they will attend in different places. Some quick definitions for all of you as you hear our acronyms, as you hear us refer to our acronyms. EAP refers to the University of California Education Abroad program. That's the system-wide program for all of the University of California. GS, it refers to our summer faculty-led program here at UC San Diego, the Global Seminars. And OAP refers to all of our other programs. We offer all of these programs through our office here. If you don't know which program your student is participating on, just ask them. They definitely know which program they will be going on. Okay, so we're ready to get started. This presentation will be recorded. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation, and then when the presentation is finished, the health and safety presentation will be about 30 minutes, and when it's finished, then we will do our best to answer questions for you and then to show you some resources as well. So Jim, take it away.
All right, thanks everyone. It's an absolute delight to speak with all of you tonight because you really are our strongest allies in making sure that your sons and daughters will be safe and have a wonderful experience while they're abroad. What I'd like to do is talk to you about health, safety, cultural adjustment issues, and I'll add a few other points that families often will ask about, such as finances, etc. But to start with, let's talk about how we can work together, because that's the key. We're here to support you and your sons and daughters. So in this process of having your children go abroad, we know that this is a very important time for you and them. So you want to be supportive, but you also want to let go, let them establish some independence, but knowing that they're going to be safe. Some of the ground rules, you may get the panicky emails that maybe the hair dryer isn't working or there's a leaky shower. Not everything is a crisis, in other words, and they have on-site professional support to help them with all of these situations. So you do not have to find a plumber in Singapore or determine what the voltage is for a hair dryer in Berlin. There's on-site professional people to help with all of these issues. And I may have some, oh, I need to press a button. Okay, here we go, very good. As I've said, there's full-time professional staff, whether they're on an education abroad program, a global seminar, or an opportunities abroad program. And these folks are trained in U.S. health and safety practices and res life, And your sons and daughters will meet these individuals when they arrive in country. They will have an on-site in-country orientation that first full day they're in country. They'll receive the names and phone numbers of the people, and they'll receive full instructions about what to do in the events of emergencies or just normal everyday problems. So that's really critical for you to understand. Another key point that we do want to emphasize is that our interactions with your sons and daughters are governed by a federal law, the Federal Education Rights Privacy Act, or FERPA for short. So while we can speak in this webinar in very general terms, we cannot speak in explicit detail about your specific son or daughter's situation unless they sign a release of information. And if they do, we will happily talk with you offline. And I should add that this PowerPoint presentation will be made available on our website, so you don't have to take notes along the way. It will all be available for you. So let's begin with the safety abroad piece. We're living in extraordinary times, and anyone who watches the news at night knows that there are concerns out there, both in the United States and abroad. And so what we want to emphasize tonight is that your sons and daughters are not alone when they're abroad. In fact, they are surrounded by a security ecosystem to protect them and keep them safe. So I'd like to talk to you about this network. First of all, we continuously monitor the U.S. State Department website, travel.state.gov. We watch for things such as State Department travel warnings, and we work closely with our on-site partners on the ground abroad to keep your sons and daughters safe. Again, full-time professional staff. They are not alone when they're abroad. Also, we do provide pre-departure information, either in written form, in manuals, online materials, webinars, and in person. To really get your sons and daughters up to speed on how to be safe abroad and what to do in that particular country. And you can ask them about that. For example, the global seminar students are having their orientations over the next 4 to 5 weeks. EAP students already have packets and information available online. So they will have a substantial amount of information on the specifics of their in-country health and safety issues. And as I said, when they arrive in country, they will have that on-site orientation. Many times that includes a walking tour of the city, introduction of the full-time professional on-site staff, and concrete advice on how to stay safe while abroad. The students also have UC study abroad insurance for health issues, as well as, if needed, in exceptionally rare cases, emergency evacuation. So this is something I'll talk about in a little more detail. But they have far more support than the average tourist would if they just decided to fly to Paris and spend a summer there. So how can students reduce risks? Well, I've emphasized it before, but if you take nothing out of this webinar tonight, please know that there's on-site full-time professional staff to support your sons and daughters. And so they should establish a connection with those individuals from day one, because those folks will give them advice on how to stay safe. If they become ill, they'll get them to an English-speaking doctor. If they're, heaven forbid, is a terrible emergency, a natural disaster, or a terrorist incident, they will be the ones to give directions and instructions on how to stay safe. And if they want to travel on weekends, those folks will be a source of information, what trains to take, etc. If your sons and daughters do plan to travel on the weekend, first, they should not do that alone. They should always practice the buddy system and go with at least one friend. And they should also let people know where they're going and when they're coming back and where they'll be staying while they are abroad. Don't wear the wrong clothing. As much as we love the United States, don't bring along your USA Rules t-shirts. You know, try and blend in a little bit with the locals as much as possible. Students should register for the State Department Safe Traveler program, and that can be done at the state.gov website. and then they should know where their consulate is in case a passport is lost, for example. They should scan copies of their passport, their credit cards, and send that to them as an email so that if in the unlikely event a purse is snatched or a wallet is lost, those documents can be regenerated more quickly. Again, very important, stick with the group, don't go off alone. That's where some problems can occur. And be smart about high-risk activities. If you wouldn't walk down a dark alley in San Diego at 3 a.m., don't do it in Barcelona. Avoid extreme sports, wild animals. This is not the time to learn how to do snake handling with cobras in India. And avoid political demonstrations. Watch that on the news, but don't get involved. Now, personal safety. Each country has its own different attitudes, taboos, and cultural practices around things like dating, for example. And again, the on-site professional staff can help give advice in these areas. Dress code. Some countries are more formal, others less, but again, avoid overt clothing that identifies you as an American. And in some cultures and countries, dressing more modestly than California beach culture really is important. We've indicated avoid going out alone at night. Watch out for special offers from strangers or people who are unusually friendly. I mean, we want to meet the locals, but not everyone has the best of intentions. So trust your instincts. That's a good piece of advice. I've already indicated letting the study center staff know about travel on the weekends, and always carry your health insurance card. The students will have this free University of California health insurance, and they should have that card with them in case they become ill. Other considerations, this is particularly critical. Set up a communication plan with your son or daughter, and please emphasize this. If there is, a newsworthy incident, an earthquake, a terror attack, something like that, they should send you a Facebook message or an email right away just to say, Mom and Dad, I'm safe. They may not be able to send much more than that, but they should at least let you know as soon as possible. We will also be reaching out in the event of an emergency. So students should know that it is their responsibility to always be monitoring their phones and staying in touch in the event of an emergency. So Facebook, email, Skype, all of these can be very helpful. If you're not currently using Facebook, have your son or daughter set up an account for you. And also, if you're not using Skype, they can do that too. That's a free service, much like what we're using today with Zoom. And that's highly preferable to cell phones, because cell phone charges abroad can be very, very exorbitant. So while it is important for them to have a cell phone, they should be careful about using it except in very short conversations, and ideally not international calls. Now, cell phones, this will vary country by country. Some of you may unlock your smartphone and buy a chip, a smart card to insert. Others may get a phone in country. This is the kind of information that will be covered in orientation, pre-departure orientation materials. Now, insurance and theft protection. We never like to think that a valuable might be stolen. So it is important to leave priceless heirlooms at home, grandma's earrings, a $1,500 SLR camera. These are things that could be targets for theft. So either leave it at home if it's irreplaceable, or if your son or daughter is a budding photographer, then make sure the camera is covered under your homeowner's insurance, and check your deductible so that if it is stolen, you'll know what the loss might be. Use money belts. Make sure purses are zipped and kept close in. For guys, put the wallet in the front pocket and don't carry around huge wads of cash. You will need cash abroad, and you can use an ATM machine and ATM card, but every day on the street, don't carry more than $20 or $30 or $40 equivalent in case something is lost. So next we'll look at health and well-being. Students should write down emergency information from their study center directors. Who would they call in the event of an emergency? What's the local equivalent of 911? And the tip is, it isn't probably 911. It'll be some other 3-digit code because every country is different. But they should write that down, and they can keep that in their purse and wallet. If your son or daughter takes prescription medication, it's very important that they carry those prescriptions with them in the event that their medication is stolen and they have to go to a pharmacy to get that refilled. It's also important that they carry the medication in the pill container that it came in. We had an instance of a student who was trying to pack and poured some pills into a Ziploc bag and left the pill bottles at home. Well, you can imagine what that looks like to a TSA security scanner. So please be cautious about that. Now, I've talked about insurance before, so I just want to emphasize that students going on the Education Abroad program, they will have insurance and they'll be signed up for that. The Global Seminar students, we've instructed them on how to sign up for the UC TRIPS insurance, and that takes 5 minutes. It's done online, and they print out an insurance card and keep that in their billfold or wallet. And for those independent outside programs, OAP, most of those organizations will provide insurance, and there's still a free UC TRIPS insurance that the students can sign up for. And we've included the URL here as well. Now, upon arrival in country, there are a few basic things that students should do. First, they need to attend that health and safety on-site orientation. That's mandatory, and that's really going to give them the key information they need to have to stay safe in the country. Keep the emergency contact information for the study center director on site. Also, let them know that it's not uncommon to come down with a cold or some other traveler's diarrhea, you know, when in country. The body is adjusting. So it's important to get sleep, eat a balanced diet. It's also important to follow the local news. I know many of our students tend not to follow current events, but hopefully study abroad will be a time when they'll spend more time following current events, not only in their home country, or their host country, I should say, but also in the United States, because locals from China to Chile will be interested in what's going on in the United States. But it's also very important from a health and safety perspective. If there is an earthquake, or if there are political demonstrations that break out, or a general strike, the students should at least be aware something is going on. And of course, their study center director will often send information out as well with global seminars. The professors may make announcements. So the students should follow the news and follow the instructions that they are given by the professionals. It's always important to exercise caution, not to be fearful, but to be prudent in what they're doing. And again, I've indicated it's important if they carry prescription meds to carry that with them in the original container. Now, alcohol and drugs. You know, this is the single most significant health and safety challenge our students face abroad. It's not ISIS, really. The incidents that we have, when they do occur, it usually is because the students have engaged in too much drinking or illegal drug use. So I want to spend some time on this. Unfortunately, in the United States, there's a college culture of binge drinking, you know, heavy drinking to get drunk to appear cool. And what we try to inform students about is that when they go abroad, that American binge style drinking is not okay. It places them at great risk for the women, for sexual assault, for the guys, for fights, for muggings. It's just a bad thing to do. Now, in most countries where the students are going, the drinking age is 18 rather than 21. So they may legally consume alcohol. But if they do choose to do that, and by the way, not all students do choose to do it, and they don't have to drink, that's choice. But if they do, a drink at dinner or one or two, but not more than that. Otherwise, it will mark them as the ugly American, you know, the drunken American who is immature. So we try to emphasize this is really a time to be responsible, and you can help with that. Now, for drugs, in a word, don't. While California and many other U.S. states have decriminalized marijuana, most of the rest of the world has not. And you could end up in a Turkish prison for 30 years for marijuana possession. So it's absolutely critical that students not engage in drug use, because that really is something we cannot spring them out of a prison if they engage in that type of behavior. So about 1/3 of Americans who are arrested overseas are arrested on drug charges. The laws overseas are draconian, and yes, they do prosecute Americans. So it's important to be aware of legal issues when going abroad. Students can be sent home if they violate those host country laws. It's critical to understand that the U.S. Constitution does not apply to us when we are abroad. It stops at the water's edge. So if they commit a crime in Japan or South Africa, they'll be held to the legal code in that country. So again, don't do anything abroad that you wouldn't do here, and don't do some things abroad that you can do here. You can still have a wonderful experience abroad, but this is a study abroad experience where the students are ambassadors of UC San Diego and the U.S., and they really should behave accordingly. Also, remember that we may not be able to get them out of prison or jail if they do commit a crime abroad. So what happens if they do? Call the center director. That way, that person can start a network of phone calls to provide some assistance with the State Department consular officials, and of course you and our office. Again, this rarely happens, so I don't want to belabor the point and scare you, but you should be aware of it. Now, the UC Code of Conduct does apply to students when they go abroad. And once every 5 years or so, we do have an incident where a student has to be sent home because they've really committed some type of crime abroad. And there is a sanction process up to and including, suspension from the university. So again, we hope nothing like that happens abroad, but realize it's not a vacation. It's a study abroad, and they are representing the University of California. So I'd like to transition a little bit and talk about success abroad and how to adjust. We have a metaphor for experiencing another culture. It's called the iceberg metaphor. And the point here is that there is something in another culture that may be very obvious. When you're walking down the street in Tokyo, you'll notice the signs are in Japanese. You'll hear Japanese being spoken. You'll see that the cars drive on the other side of the road in Japan. That's very obvious, right? So that's the tip of the iceberg. That's what we can see. But for most other cultures, the most significant issues are sort of unseen or under the surface. So we try to emphasize this to students. You'll see here that under the waterline, there's all kinds of unspoken rules or emotions or verbal and nonverbal signals. And this can relate to everything from the nature of friendships to dating to punctuality in terms of time. Some countries are very punctual, some are not by US standards. So understanding these differences is something that the study center director, the staff can assist with so that your son or daughter can make a good transition. But it's also important to realize that there will be some ups and downs on that journey. Just as they had some ups and downs when they first came to college as a freshman, and you may have gotten some panicked emails or some emails indicating this is the greatest thing in the world, and then 2 weeks later, they're really down. So this stage of adjustment is actually quite expected. It's normal. Students go through this when they come to college. They go through it when they study abroad. So please be prepared for that. There may be initial anxiety followed by elation and then culture shock, and you may be getting emails or whatnot. So you don't have to try and solve all of this. Again, remember, there's professional staff on site to provide support on the ground for this. But sometimes just listening and understanding and encouraging them to keep trying, keep exposing themselves to the culture and learning about it, and they'll get a hold of it in time. And for most students, this really is the case. Now, occasionally a student will experience really profound culture shock. in which case, if they need to see a counselor, the on-site professional staff can help facilitate that. So again, being a partner with you and your son and daughter and at our office and the staff on site, we can make sure that they have a good adjustment, and that this normal stage of adjustment leads them to have a very favorable experience overall. Now, I'd like to talk about a few other issues beyond just health and safety. One of them is money. A few tips here. Please have a money conversation with your son or daughter. Sit them down at the kitchen table and talk about the budget and emphasize that they need to stick to that budget. Try to avoid budget busters. You know, build in a little bit of money for maybe gifts or a special dinner or maybe a little bit of travel. You can decide that, but you can also economize, and cell phone use is one of those areas to be careful. Use Skype instead. If students are bringing an ATM card, and I recommend that, please be sure to talk to the bank well in advance to make sure that the bank knows that they will be in Berlin from August 23rd to December 13th or wherever it may be, so that the ATM card is not eaten by the machine the first time the student puts it in. I always recommend traveling with the equivalent of about $100 in local currency, and so ask your bank or a credit union before you go to provide that, and the smallest denomination bills possible, because a lot of places around the world just don't take plastic. So it's important to have some cash available, and then to periodically withdraw that. Learn about the currency conversion rates, even go online to look at what the money looks like so that there's some familiarity with that. Also learn local customs on tipping. In many places around the world, they don't tip. That's included in the bill. So you don't want to tip twice, in other words. The academic culture is also something that will be different. Teaching styles and examinations can be very different from the US styles. Typically, there are fewer quizzes and small assignments, and more emphasis is placed on one or two big exams or papers at the end of the term. So students need to still stay on track and study, because they don't have all those little assignments to force them to be studying along the way. So you can help us and help them by sort of prompting to say, how's the reading going? Are you staying on track? Now, family members should not try to contact local professors. That's just not done around the rest of the world. But you can support your students in the way I've indicated. And finally, students should be very clear about asking up front early on in the term what is expected of them. Okay, diet. Here's another one. Some of our students have special dietary needs, perhaps vegetarian or vegan. So some of these options may be limited abroad. And so it's important to ask in advance if those options exist. Encourage students to try new things, try new flavors, but also if they have any type of food allergies, let the study abroad staff know that. Finally, if they're staying in a homestay, and I stayed with the family when I studied abroad, it was a wonderful experience. But if for some reason they're not having a good experience, they don't have to tough it out in silence. They can talk to the on-site professional staff to say something isn't working out. But I'd like to emphasize this is exceptionally rare. It really is maybe once a year that we have to move a student. So again, some of these sensational issues that you may hear about in the media, in the reality, rarely happen. Now, sustainability, whether the student is living in a residence hall, an apartment, or a homestay, it's important to realize that in many places around the world, there are scarce resources. So it's important to be respectful and follow the local practices. That would include things like turning lights out when you leave a room. You may not have 24/7 broadband internet access to download Netflix movies. They probably shouldn't be doing that anyway. They should be out meeting people in the country. They should follow local practices regarding recycling and conservation, especially things like water usage. And we're used to this in California with the droughts. Don't take half-hour hot water showers every day. They may just not have those resources. Internet use. You may be very used to staying connected with your students, But in a lot of places around the world, the internet is spotty. They don't have 99.99999% availability of internet. So don't worry about that. That's part of the process. That's the way most of the 7 billion people in the world interface with the internet, if they have it at all. So stay in touch, but don't worry if there are some occasional interruptions along the way. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about things like prejudice. Every society around the world has different perspectives. Almost all of our students are welcomed and greeted in a very friendly manner, but sometimes there are incidents, and this could be as a result of race or gender, religion, identity. So it's very important that students talk to their full-time professional support staff if there is any type of incident and how to minimize any chance of reoccurrence. If students feel their security is threatened, of course they should feel free to call the local police. But we also emphasize that don't judge an entire country or culture by one individual. We wouldn't want people coming from another country to judge the United States by the actions of one person who might be prejudiced to visitors from another country here, so we wouldn't practice the opposite. Now, I know that one of the perennial questions is what should we pack? How much should we pack? We actually are going to be doing a workshop for the students. It's called Packing and Traveling, World Travel 101. It'll be coming up on May 10th here in our Study Abroad office from 6 to 7:30. And we're going to have Hosteling International. We're going to talk about how to travel on a student budget safely and comfortably, what to pack, what not to pack. So encourage your sons and daughters to come to this event on May 10th at 6 p.m. in the Study Abroad office. And then I'd like to close by emphasizing, again, how we can partner together. When your son or daughter comes back from the Study Abroad experience, many times they are really going to want to talk to you about it, and not just for 5 minutes in the airport on the way home, but they may want to debrief over the course of weeks and months ahead. Many times students tell me and my colleagues that study abroad was one of the most profound things they've ever done. It's changed their perspective on the world and on themselves. It may lead to them changing their major or career directions, or it may solidify goals that they'd been a little bit uncertain of prior to departure. Whatever the case may be for your son or daughter, we encourage you to please stay engaged and listen to them, because they really will want your support. But also realize that there are resources here on campus to help in this process. They can stay connected to international issues by living in the International House. It's a residence hall of half international and half U.S. students when they come back. There are many study abroad returnee events. There are student groups and community service based around international connections. Additionally, you should encourage students to internationalize their resume. Our Career Center can help. We also do a conference on this that we'll tell students about. Students can be an employee in our office, work as a student assistant to help the next group of students study abroad. And sometimes students will actually plan another international experience. So there's a lot of support for your sons and daughters, so we encourage you to be the initial point of contact, but then always refer them back to us for assistance. And finally, I'd just like to close with a quote that you may want to share with your sons and daughters, and that is, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So we thank you for being supportive of your son and daughter's plan to study abroad. This is really wonderful. It's a tremendous gift of openness and insight that you are giving to your sons and daughters. And so we thank you very much for your partnership. And now I think we're going to take some questions.
Thank you, Jim. Before we take questions, I want to show you all where to look on our website for a lot of the information that Jim talked about. And actually, I'm going to show you. So our website is very easy to remember. It's studyabroad.ucsd.edu. If there should be any type of incident abroad that would affect any of our students, you can always come back to our web page here, and right here by the quick links, we will have an update as quickly as we can get it on the situation if it's an emergency and where you can go for more information. But to find a lot of the information that Jim just talked about in his presentation, you can click on the Family tab here on our website. And as you scroll through this page, you'll find a lot of wonderful resources. We will post, first we'll post this presentation right here. We'll create a new area for the 2017 Parent Family Orientation webinar. So we'll post this recorded webinar so you can come back and watch this. And then we will have additional resources. You can see all these additional resources that we have. At the end of this presentation, we'll give you the dates for both the EAP specific orientation as well as the global seminar specific webinar presentation that we will do. And those will be recorded as well. And if you scroll down here, you can find a little bit more information about all of our programs that we're talking about. So EAP, global seminars, and OAP. There are a lot of really great resources here that our OAP partners as well as our EAP partner does for parents. So you can see some of these guides, the CEA Parents Guide, the API Parent Study Guide. These are really great resources for you to read through and talk with your students about their upcoming experience. And then down in this bottom section, we have all of the State Department resources as well as some additional reading and advice and guides that you can review. So that's our website. And then let me go to our wrap-up slides here, and then we will start taking questions now. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box in your Zoom window, and as we see the questions, we will try to answer them. Kim, are you seeing any questions coming up?
Just one, but there was one posted to the chat box earlier, asking where and when can we get the health insurance card. So the card, Jim, that I think was in your window.
Yeah, that's a sample. So you may end up, your son or daughter may end up making something like that, or it may be provided in various formats. That's typically done during the on-site orientation. So they will get that their first full day in country. So they could send you an email with that information.
Great, thank you. There's a question about how and where can I find the FERPA release form for my student to sign?
What we would do is we need to speak directly to your son or daughter about that, and we can provide the form to them, and they sign it authorizing us to release information to you, and they specify it. So we need to meet with your son or daughter on that.
There's a question about immunization lists for students. I know for the Education Abroad program, the student health centers all receive information from the system-wide EAP office as to which immunizations are necessary. And so actually students would have access to that in their pre-departure information, which is also live posted to the website that you can also access. So you could ask your son or daughter where that might be so they can take a look at it. But yes, all of that information is communicated to the students and also to our student health offices on campus.
And just to build on that, for the global seminar students, they have all, as part of their application, they have a health form that they have to take to their physician. And so they would be getting any immunizations that would be required for the country that they're going to as part of that. The physicians or nurse practitioners would recommend that.
There's a question about, is the health insurance included in the EAP costs, even when the student is not covered by SHIP? And so yes, the answer is yes. In the EAP costs, students are automatically enrolled in the EAP health insurance, and will be able to print out their insurance card, and there actually is a tab on the EAP site. Again, it's not password protected, so you do have access to it, where you can actually go and look at all of the details in the entire EAP insurance policy. It is important to note, I'm glad that you actually raised the question or mentioned SHIP, that the current EAP health insurance policy does not meet the criteria for the Affordable Care Act as minimum essential coverage. So either your student will need to also purchase SHIP or also or be covered by another comparable insurance. And that information is available for our students on the website if they do have questions about that. Obviously, moving forward, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the ACA and whether it will be repealed, but at least as of today, students do need to also maintain some kind of insurance that meets those criteria.
And I should just emphasize for global seminars, again, global seminars are 5-week-long summer programs. And so the insurance that they will have abroad does not replace their insurance that they'll have in the United States. But they will sign up for free University of California travel insurance, and we will be providing all the information they need to do that. And if they have any questions about that, they should just contact their advisor. We're happy to help.
Someone was asking if the Viber app is also an acceptable means of communication. Kelly or Jim, do you have experience with Viber?
I don't.
I do know someone who does use it, and she's had great success with it and recommends it. So I can share that, but I haven't used it myself.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of similar to WhatsApp. I know that in certain countries, WhatsApp is easier to use than just regular texting, and it might be, I think it might be free, so it might not carry the charges with it that texting does. But no, we don't have any official information about that or official recommendation on that.
Okay.
I would ask your student about that. They probably know.
There is a question whether the on-site staff is available 24/7. Yes, for the Education Abroad program, it definitely is, and I believe as well for global seminars, Jim?
Yes, that's right. It is.
Yeah. And then a question, should we expect that every student will be met at the airport upon arrival? Do you want to answer that for GS, Jim, and then I can respond for EAP?
Sure. For global seminars, we do tell students that if they arrive on a specific day within a specific time window, there will be someone waiting for them. But if they are traveling on their own, then they should ask us where they need to be on that first day. They may, already be in country, so they would meet us at the hotel or at the apartment complex. Now, if their plane is delayed, they will have in their pre-departure orientations a phone number to call in country to say, my plane is delayed, I'm going to be arriving 6 hours late, what should I do? And then they'll be speaking to someone who will give them instructions. Now, it may very well be that if they're arriving after midnight, then they're going to need to take a taxi in, but then they'll be told how to do that. That's why I always say it's important to have the equivalent of $100 in local currency in cash, so that if you do have to take a taxi that ends up being 50 euros, to get into the housing, that you can do that.
And for EAP, for almost every program I can think of, students are responsible for getting themselves from the airport to their housing or to the study center to check in. And so, no, the expectation should not be that every student will be met at the airport. But EAP does give them very specific and detailed instructions as to how to get from the airport to these different locations by various means of transportation. So even though we're not meeting students, they are given very specific instructions, and they also will have the contact information for the staff on site that they can reach out to them if the flight is delayed or if there's any other kind of problem that they have in getting there. There is a question, this is a very good idea. Will the What to Pack event be recorded and accessible remotely? My student is not at UCSD. Do you know, Kelly, if...
We can work on that. That is a very good
suggestion. It's a great idea.
Yeah, we have not had that recorded in the past, but I think we could probably make that happen. So I will make a note of that.
Okay. There's a question about the immunizations and whether they're mandatory, and someone had another daughter who had a severe reaction to an immunization, so they have some concerns about that. So I guess my recommendation would be that that you speak to the doctor about it, or if the student is going through UCSD Student Health to have those immunizations, that they're discussing that with them to get some medical advice. But I don't know, Kelly and Jim, if you have some other suggestions.
No, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone wants to know when the tuition is going to be due for the global seminar programs.
Sure. The bills will come out in late June for the summer session 1 programs, and in July for summer session 2 programs.
Okay. Someone asked if you don't have SHIP insurance, when and where can you get that? It's a UC insurance, and so students can get it through Campus Health, Student Health here. They have an insurance office. So if you just Google UC SHIP, it will come up. And a question about B of A and Chase Bank said they didn't have ATM access in Japan, so how can my child withdraw money if the culture doesn't accept credit cards?
Well, I know that Japan, they certainly have a lot of ATM machines over there. We send students all the time. I guess I would say that you may not have a Bank of America ATM machine there. You may be going to a Japanese bank, but your card should still work in that. Now, there may be a transaction fee.
Mm-hmm.
It may be 1 to 3% of the money that you pull out, but Japan has ATM machines. I guarantee you of that. Now, when you go to a small mom and pop store or restaurant, they don't have the culture of the credit cards, so you do need to pay with cash. But maybe you need to redirect that question a little bit to your bank and just say, I'm going to be using this abroad. Are there certain Japanese banks where our bank has a relationship? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if they don't, then what's the standard fee? What percentage of the amount of money withdrawn typically is taken? And so that can be a question. But the standard is about 1 to 3%.
I think too, though, that goes back to Jim, your suggestion to try to make sure your student has at least $100 worth of local currency when they arrive. And with planning, you can get this from any of the major banks, but it's just good practice because you never know, even if your student is arriving in London, for example, at Heathrow Airport, if it's midnight when they arrive and there are very few kiosks actually open, like the ATM, sometimes, they're not open, or maybe they're broken or something's happening. So just plan for the unexpected, I think, at all costs is a good practice.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. There's a question asking if we can clarify the travel insurance. Is it included another travel insurance not needed because they're getting, say, offers on the STA website when purchasing a flight about also purchasing their insurance?
Well, now this is important. There's different kinds of insurance. For example, there's insurance to protect the value of your plane ticket in case you are not able to travel. I do recommend purchasing that, but that's extra. Now, if it's insurance like international health insurance, they don't need to buy that from STA Travel because they'll have that from the UC.
Right, and the same with the AP would be the same coverage. And then there's a question, if we purchase SHIP before the student leaves, will he be 100%, covered 100% abroad, has insurance under their insurance now, under parents' insurance now, and you waive ship. So if your insurance, if you have Kaiser and HMO, something like that, or private insurance, if yours meets the criteria for the ACA, then you can waive ship and you would not need to purchase it. And actually what we're finding, if this is an EAP parent, what we're finding between the EAP travel insurance and the either ship or outside agency insurance that is ACA compliant, that students are really double covered. And let's see. For global seminars, are there any arrangements made for departures, just like in arrivals? And someone else had asked whether students will be delivered back to the airport at the end of the program.
Yeah, in our pre-departure global seminar orientations, the students will all meet each other and they'll meet the professor. And many times then the students will say, oh, are you flying out of San Diego or Los Angeles or San Francisco? And so then they'll sort of form their own little groups to get on the planes together. Now, in terms of in-country, yes, there is typically a bus that would take them back to the airport if they're flying back, you know, at the end of the program. Now, sometimes a student will say, well, you know, I want to backpack across Europe for a few weeks. Well, then they're on their own. You know, they'll have to make their way to the airport on their own.
And someone asked about if the in-country staff would speak English for the global seminars, and I can answer that for EAP as well. Yes, all of the in-country staff do speak English, so students are not expected to know the language of the host country and, you know, must communicate in that language. So definitely the staff that we have working with students are English speakers.
Absolutely.
Let's see. What else? There's a question about when will EAP students know what other countries are going so they maybe can travel together. That's a very good question, and I know, Jim, you can answer that for GS as well. But for EAP, we do have, as Jim mentioned, orientations that are coming up in May, and so students will have the opportunity to get to meet one another at the orientations. We also can provide students with lists of other UC San Diego students who are going to their same programs so that they can potentially connect and perhaps book a flight together. We also do have the capability of connecting students with students from other UC campuses who will be doing this the same program. So we can also help them get connected with students at other campuses who might also be going on the same program. So yes, we are trying to make sure that students are meeting each other before they actually leave. And for GS, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, they will meet their peers in the pre-departure orientations, and then once they're in country, they may decide to meet up with some friends and take a train trip from, you know, Rome to Paris on the weekend or something of that sort. And the full-time professional on-site staff can provide assistance and recommendations on how to do that if they like.
Thank you. There's a question specifically about EAP on the financial pages. It states that round-trip airfare is included. Is this correct? How is it covered? So the estimate for a round-trip airfare for all of the programs is included in the EAP budgets. That does not mean that the ticket has been purchased. It just means that in the budget they're giving you an idea of what the current airfare is on an average flight. But you or the student still needs to go and purchase that ticket. So hopefully that helps answer that question for you. There's another
time for about 2 more questions.
Okay, there's another question about the medical insurance that the family has would not cover their child abroad and they need to get insurance. Where can we get it? So again, your son or daughter, you could purchase SHIP insurance, which is the UC insurance for your student if you want to do that. Otherwise, you would need to look at other options. Jim, do you have any other suggestions?
You know, for the most part, the insurance, the UC insurance, it's really designed to protect students. most illnesses are a sprained ankle because they're wearing flip-flops, and we really tried to tell the students, wear real shoes. Flip-flops don't work on cobblestones and castles in Europe. So that's the first thing. Travelers' diarrhea, that's number 2. So as delightful as all that street food looks, they're not going to have an A from the health department on that stand. So, avoid the fresh fruits and juices and whatnot, because that's what gets you. Make sure you're going to well-known places and eating well-cooked foods. I mean, those are really the 2 things that impact students. The other thing is, in some countries, it's important to really cross in the crosswalks and watch the drivers, because, for example, in Ecuador, cars have the right of way, not pedestrians. So if you're slowly walking across the street and the car's coming at you, he assumes you're going to get out of the way. Because that's the law. So, they'll tell you those kinds of things, but, most students are pretty healthy, and, you're not going to have massive medical bills. So the UC insurance is really good on this.
Thank you, Jim. And someone else is asking a question about traveler's checks. And as far as I've heard, those are pretty much dinosaurs in most places in the world, right?
Yep, don't bother.
Yeah.
They won't know what they are, or they won't take them.
Yeah, it'll be very difficult, I think, to get traveler's checks cashed in today.
Yeah, this is not Carl Malden from the 1970s.
Exactly.
Home without it. That's a different era.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me show the slides here with our 2 upcoming webinars. So for EAP parents and families, and for Global Seminar parents and families, we will have these upcoming webinars. And so the EAP one is on Wednesday, May 24th from 5 to 6 p.m. You'll see Kim again, as well as some of our colleagues from the EAP office in Santa Barbara. And these are some of the topics that will be covered. So structure of EAP support network, the academic courses and planning, preparing for study abroad, more about health and safety and insurance, as well as finances and financial aid, and then returning to UC San Diego. So that's on May 24th. Mark your calendars. The invitation again will be sent to your students, so be sure and ask them to forward that to you. And then for global seminars, the webinar is on Tuesday, May 23rd from 5 to 6 p.m. And some of the same topics will be covered. So working with our office, health and safety support, tips for reducing risk while abroad, and then more on the career and professional value of study abroad, as well as culture shock and important resources and information. And you will be able to get some more detailed country-specific information on both of these webinars for your students. So at this time, we would all like to thank you for joining us. We hope we were able to answer a lot of your questions. However, if you have more questions, please feel free to email us at our address here, abroad@ucsd.edu, and we are happy to have a phone call with you or to email responses to you. So we hope this has been helpful. We will send a follow-up survey just to ask you for feedback on this webinar, and if you could fill that out, we would appreciate it so we can improve it and make it better for future parents and families. So thank you, have a good evening, and we look forward to working with your student. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.